Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles is a sub-franchise of the Square Enix Final Fantasy games. Crystal Chronicles is reminiscent of rustic medieval life and has none of the science fiction futuristic qualities of the main franchise, placing it firmly in a fantasy genre. The game takes place in an unnamed fantasy world inhabited by 4 races. A poisonous miasma covers the atmosphere of this world, and its inhabitants have little memory of how or why the miasma came to be. They only know that their villages are protected by fragments of the Great Crystal, and that the crystals require renewal using myrrh, which is an energy harvested from magical trees. The player takes control of a caravan of up to 8 characters to search for the myrrh trees. The caravan carries a crystal chalice that not only collects the myrrh, but also serves to protect them from the miasma. As the caravan travels the world, they also learn the world's history from travelers and characters found in other villages in order to discover the mystery of the miasma, documenting their adventures and findings in a journal along the way. After collecting 3 drops of myrrh, the caravanners return to their village to celebrate their success by playing music, dancing, and recounting the journal entries of their adventures before starting their next journey. Although Crystal Chronicles has some things in common with the main franchise, such as Moogles, chocobos, and many different monsters within the games, several elements of the game are different, including the animation style, which is more cartoon-like, the battle system, which uses real-time fighting instead of turn-based fighting, and most notably, the music. Kumi Tanioka, the composer, scored the soundtrack using period instruments such as the crumhorn, hurdy-gurdy, lute, and recorder, giving the music a distinct sound. Tanioka said in an interview that she was influenced by a group called Roba House that played traditional and ethnic music. Roba House's website states at the top, "Roba House is a place where we can enjoy sounds coming from a wonderland. Instruments from medieval and Renaissance times create sounds which remind us of something that we, living in modern times, have forgotten." Given the narrative and setting of Crystal Chronicles, Tanioka's inspiration to use period instruments and emulate the music of Roba House is no coincidence. A precedent set by other forms of screen music in the past has caused our current culture to associate early music of the medieval, Renaissance, and Baroque periods with nostalgic feelings and an idyllic past. The game's rustic medieval setting, the journal's importance in the game's narrative, and the music all work together to establish a sense of nostalgia for a world in which the player has never been. The importance of nostalgia in the narrative is emphasized through the caravan's journal entries. In addition to reading the entries from their adventures at the end of every year, a journal entry from past caravanners' journals is read in the cutscene before each dungeon.
Travelers walked the roads without fear of monsters. The Yugs constructed a great sluice to channel water down from Lake Shala, transforming Jagan Creek into a great river. Over time, the Jagan turned the vast plains of Fung into farmland, thereby providing food to people the world over. To us, this sluice is more precious than anything.
The prominence of the journal, in addition to the early period music, emphasizes the importance of looking to the past in the game's narrative. Analysis of the music shows that instrument choice isn't the only element of early music that influenced the music in the game. In the following music cue analysis, I will show how the harmony, melody, texture, and even form have elements of medieval, Renaissance, and Baroque influence. In the Renaissance and medieval eras, melodic and harmonic content were based on the 7 church modes, rather than the tonal major and minor scales we use today. You may know the modes today with these names instead. Many of the game's 54 cues are modal, and of the 7 modes, Tanioka seemed to favor the Dorian and Mixolydian modes. The modal nature of the melodies in these cues carries a culturally coded meaning that identifies it with the medieval and Renaissance eras. The first cue we'll analyze is from the first dungeon the caravan encounters, Riverbell Path. This cue plays an important role in establishing the setting through the cultural coding and narrative cueing associated with early music. This dungeon is simply a path in the open countryside, which visually could be set in any time or any place. The music cue here, called Departure, helps keep the player immersed in the game world. For this cue, Tanioka builds the melody and harmony off the Dorian and Aeolian modes. In addition to the modal melody, here are a few other early music elements present in Departure. The next cue, titled Magi is Everything, is from the dungeon level Moshet Manor. The dungeon boss is Lord Jack Moshet, who lives in a castle. The caravan moves about the castle defeating monsters before finally battling Lord Moshet himself. The music for this level is reminiscent of a Baroque court dance in triple meter, most closely resembling a saraband. So although the music more closely resembles a Baroque dance, the cultural coding for the medieval era is still present in the music. Music in film and television is not always accurate in its representation of early music, often mixing styles and settings. The conflation of these eras has coded Renaissance and Baroque music elements with the medieval era, and consequently, nostalgia and the idyllic past. This cultural coding behind the music, in addition to the visuals of the castle, further immerses the player into the game's narrative. As you listen to Magi is Everything, here are some of the other early music elements you'll hear. The next cue, called Prosperity and Tradition, is from the Lilty Town Olfateria. Towns in the game are areas in which the player can craft weapons, armor, and accessories, as well as buy supplies and talk to villagers. Talking to the villagers throughout the game reveals clues to the world's history and how the miasma came to be. The animation and visual cues indicate a medieval town square, and many of the NPCs are knights. Just like in Moshet Manor, the music cue supports the visual setting and narrative. This cue shares many of the same early music elements as Departure and Magi is Everything. Here are some of the elements you'll hear. Many of the game's 54 cues sound like early period music. However, when appropriate for the narrative, Tanioka composed some cues that strayed from this style to better fit the setting. Tanioka still scored some of these cues with period instruments, so they're not totally removed from the style in the game. Here are a few examples. As you can see from the music analysis, the early music elements in Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles supports the visual setting and narrative, which all work together to further immerse the player in the game and create a sense of nostalgia for the game world. Thanks for watching, and as one of my favorite games, I hope it inspired you to check out Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, and if not, I hope that it was at least interesting and informative.